Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Tom Harwood. I'm covering again whilst Camilla is away, but don't go anywhere. Of course, she's back next week, so we can all look forward to that. But this is the only politics show being broadcast on British television this morning, so it's your one-stop shop for all political news. Don't go anywhere. I'll be quizzing Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer just in a moment. After the supposed death of the Wagner Group's chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, I'll also speak to Vladimir Putin's former number 2 in the Kremlin, the former Prime Minister of Russia, Mikhail Kasyanov. We'll hear from the chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, and with just 2 days to go before the ULEZ zone is extended to Outer London, I'll get the thoughts of the Reform Party's candidate to be London Mayor, Howard Cox. Also, Bill Clinton's former special counsel in the White House joins us to discuss, well, you guessed it, that Donald Trump mugshot. Well, let's turn to the front pages now and see what's got the nation talking. Let's start with the Sunday Telegraph, which says Reeves, no wealth tax under Labour. They've got an interview with Labour's shadow chancellor there. On to the Sunday Times, which leads with damning email told of chaos on Let Be War. Now, the Observer today leads with Sunak faces fresh conflict of interest row on India trade talks. Much to get into there. And on the Mail on Sunday, secret Labour plan to charge drivers by mile. They're talking about replacing fuel duty, no doubt. And the Sunday Express. PM, life to mean life for vilest killers. They've got an interview with the Prime Minister running today. The Sun on Sunday goes with Met cops hit by hackers. A big story there. And the Sunday Mirror today goes with Let Be Bosses, get out of jail free card. And finally, the Daily Star has a peculiar story, as they often do, which is put your little Johns away. It's about Sherwood Forest, but I don't think we quite need to go into much of the detail there. Well, I'm delighted that joining me to discuss what's perhaps behind the front pages today in our paper review is Giles Kenningham, who was the number 10 communications chief for David Cameron. Giles, thanks for being with us this morning. It's interesting across the papers. There have been a lot of interviews with senior political figures.
Yeah, big set pieces, I suppose. People taking advantage of the fact quite a sort of quiet news cycle during the summer and trying to get their agenda out there. Obviously, I suppose the delicate truce in the Tory party has been shattered today by this bombshell interview from Nadine Dorries.
Shall we start with, then, the Mail on Sunday? Because they've got this spread that includes the really quite feisty resignation letter of Nadine Dorries. What's she saying?
I mean, she doesn't pull her punches. She basically says Sunak has no mandate to lead the party. She kind of indulges in a bit of class warfare, talking about his Prada shoes, his Savile Row shirt, and basically says he has deserted the core values of the Conservative Party. Now, a huge political headache for the Conservative Party. Why is that? Because they're now going to have to fight a by-election, which they probably won't win, but they're going to have to throw the kitchen sink at it, have to throw a lot of money at it. Comes at a time when we saw 2 days ago that they are actually in debt, and will be huge opportunity cost. And you're probably going to have a by-election probably just on the eve of conference and after conference, as Sunak's trying to sort of reset the party, but also set out the roadmap to the next general election.
The moment of most political pain, perhaps, for the Prime Minister. I suppose Nadine Dorries has always been a bit of a thorn in the side of many Prime Ministers. When you were working in Number 10, what was the sort of reaction to how she was behaving? Of course, famously, she went into the jungle in 2012.
Yeah, she was one of the so-called awkward squad, one of the agitators, but probably not as big a problem as she's for Sunak as she was for us. I think the kind of attitude was, well, look, Nadine will be Nadine. We tried to placate her, but an acceptance that she was always going to probably be a critic sniping from the sidelines. But she wasn't a huge, big political headache for us then.
I suppose we need to wait and see what her book reveals, if it's going to be anything like the sort of...
Which is, I think, due on the eve of Tory party conference, isn't it? I think it's meant to sort of lift the lid on sort of what was behind Boris Johnson's downfall, and obviously, once again, you know, being launched to try and cause maximum pain for the Tories.
No, fascinating stuff. But also, there's a big interview in the Sunday Telegraph you've picked out, which is with Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor. She's saying there won't be a wealth tax under the Labour Party.
This is all part of, I suppose, Labour's decontamination strategy when it comes to the economy. The economy has been their Achilles heel. They've not been trusted on it. And in this kind of quite wide-ranging interview, notables in the Telegraph to sort of appeal to sort of middle-class Tory voters, she rules out a so-called wealth tax, mansion tax, also rules out any more tax hikes, said she's going to go for growth. So, yeah, an interesting ploy by her. If you speak to Tories, they say that famous Liam Byrne note, there's no money left, still comes up in focus groups. So you'll actually, I think, you'll probably see the Tories trying to hammer the bruise on that one from Labour.
So despite the high inflation the United Kingdom has, despite our relatively low growth, Labour still sees the economy as a bit of a vulnerability, perhaps? Yeah,
a bit like how the NHS is a vulnerability for the Tories, I think, yeah. For Labour, it is clearly a problem. Interesting, this idea of a so-called mansion wealth tax. We polled this in 2015 in Preston, which is a very safe Labour seat, which, interestingly, I think has the highest level of home ownership in the country, 95% there. Universally, Labour voters were against it. I think this is where Labour have been missing a trick. Most people are aspirational. They're not pro-taxes. So, yeah, interesting positioning. I think the question for the Tories now is to force Labour into more positions in the run-up to the election. So far, I think they've managed to get away with not saying too much, just hoping the Tories screw it up.
Sort of winning by default with constructive ambiguity, being all things to all people by not saying very much at all.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Starmer's quite untested. I think we were just discussing before we were on air about the idea of TV debates. And ironically, I think, for once, the Tories will be quite pro-TV debates as they're 20, 25 points behind in the polls and probably fancy their chances against a Labour leader who so far doesn't seem to be that agile on his feet.
It's interesting. Always it seems to be that the people sort of behind that have the most to gain are the ones agitating for it, and those that are in...
And you've seen this week, haven't you, with the sort of Republican primary elections, you know, Trump, who's by clear the massive front runner, he chose not to do them because he's got nothing to gain from it.
No, it'll be interesting. Labour agitating so much for these debates in previous years, perhaps they'll be rowing back from it now. But that's not the only interview. Also, Theresa May has popped up her head this week in the Sunday Times magazine. What's she been saying?
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I think former prime ministers, it's a difficult balancing act in this country. Once you leave the political scene, you're kind of expected to sort of leave the limelight. And I suppose the question for them is, when do they make interventions? Reasonably interesting interview from Theresa May. Not someone who often commits news, but I suppose one of the standout news lines is you said that John Bercow actively frustrated her efforts to get a Brexit deal through Parliament.
No, it's interesting. She sort of has almost pulled back her punches against Boris Johnson, who you might expect she has quite a lot to say about. Not so much to say, because this is all about her new book that's coming out soon. It is interesting. She sort of seems to be more going after Bercow than Boris.
Yeah, interesting, yeah. And the book is not biographical. I think it's abuse of power, and it's looking at things like Hillsborough and the Daniel Morgan murders. But yeah, and in this interview, she's not someone known for showing emotion, opening up, but she talks a bit about crying outside Number 10 when she resigned. And it's relatively, I think, reflective, philosophical, and, I think she shows a reasonable amount of self-awareness in there as well.
Also an interesting bit about holding Donald Trump's hand and what really happened on that slope. I wonder, will this book sort of be a landmark thing, or will it be sort of here today, gone tomorrow? How much does what Theresa May says now matter?
I think it does matter. It doesn't feel like this book is about settling scores, but I think she does have the sort of ability to, to break this delicate truce in the party by making interventions. To be fair to her, I don't think it's something that she does gratuitously. She so far has chosen to speak out on issues she cares about, and I think probably recognises she has more cut-through when she's more selective and isn't just that continual voice sniping from the sidelines that perhaps we saw historically people like Edward Heath doing, and perhaps John Major, who was very good for a long time but perhaps intervened, some people may say, too much around the Brexit referendum.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting balancing act. Sort of the less you say, perhaps the more power those words have as a former Prime Minister. But there are more interviews still this weekend. Yeah. Sadiq Khan in the Sunday Times, he's saying that history will prove him right on ULEZ.
Yeah, he's doubling down on his ULEZ charge, which is, I think, coming into force in Outer London on Tuesday. So far has been proved to be quite controversial. Many people say it cost Labour Boris's seat in Uxbridge, which the Tories held. He's saying, no, I'm on the right side of history. Obviously, this is coming at a time of a cost of living crisis. People could be hit with nearly a £30 charge for driving into London. And I think you can see Labour very nervous about this. Starmer has rowed back on other sort of clean air, congestion charging plans throughout the country. So I think there's a question mark. The one thing in Sadiq's favour, I think, in the run-up to the mayoral elections next year, he hasn't got strong opposition. There isn't a fantastic Tory candidate standing, so he may well get a third term.
It's interesting the Tories haven't gone after anyone box office. I mean, Susan Hall is their candidate. She's been a member of the London Assembly for quite some time. She's known to Conservative activists. She's been active on social media, but perhaps not a household name. Why is it that the Tories have failed to pick another Boris Johnson or sort of a big media figure that's well known?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not for want of trying. When I was in government, I think we approached Karen Brady, Seb Coe. We tried to get that big ticket name, and London does need someone who's got big name recognition, I think, to get in. It's bizarre. It's a great job. Being Mayor of London is a global figure. You get to bang the drum for what is the greatest city in the world. So, yeah, it's bizarre.
No, really, really odd. But just finally, you've picked out something in the Sunday Times about a Netflix success for Meghan Markle.
Yeah, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, whose finances, some may argue, have taken a bit of a hit this year. According to Netflix, Suits, which was a programme which made her famous box office hit, has had a massive resurgence in the next Netflix charts. And, maybe it's going to herald like a new series coming forward. So not all bad news after they were dumped by Spotify.
Perhaps another job in line for the Duchess of Kent. Well, Giles Kenningham, thank you so much for going through the papers this morning. Really interesting set of papers, of course. But let's now turn to Wolverhampton, where Jack Carson is with our People's Panel this week. Jack, what questions do the panel have for our guests coming up on the show?
Yeah, good morning to you, Tom. Welcome to the Black Country. Welcome to Wolverhampton. We're in this absolutely beautiful building. This is called the Chubbs Building here in Wolverhampton. It's a Grade 2 listed building. It was the warehouse and the factory of Chubbs and Son Lock Company. So we're certainly going to be in safe hands today. We're at the Medicine Bakery for the People's Panel, and I'm joined here with Victoria now, who's here at the bakery, works for the bakery. Tell me, how's business?
Business is good at the moment, yeah. We're the newest medicine out of the 4 across the region to open, and then this is where the bakery's based. So yeah, lots going on here. Yeah, it's quite busy at the moment. So.
Fantastic. There's certainly a good few people here grabbing some coffees and grabbing some food this morning. But let's come over and meet the People's Panel for their questions with the politicians today. We've got 3 people here on the panel today. We've got Linda, Pete and William. William, let's start with you today. Your question is for the Conservative members on the interview list today. Your question's about immigration.
Yes, it is. The Prime Minister's promised to cut the boats coming over from France. I haven't actually seen that yet. So what's going on with the promises?
And what for you would solve this? I mean, we know it's been an issue for the government. They can't get those numbers down. What for you, would help that? What for you might be the solution?
I'd say the solution would be increasing the number of border forces boats. Other than that, I'm sure there's other solutions as well.
Thank you, Pete. Of course, we had that quite explosive resignation letter from Nadine Dorries last night. Your question's based on some of the things she said in that letter, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The standout comment was about the zombie government. Rishi Sunak has been in power almost a year now. He's made various promises, as William alluded to. He appears to have done nothing. And my question is, do the Tory government see the end is nigh and they're just sitting back and biding their time until the next election?
Now, Linda, Howard Cox is on the show today. Of course, he's running for London Mayor. Tell me about your question for him.
Well, one of the pledges he's making is to make London safer for women. I have a daughter who lives in London, who obviously has to travel on the underground and then walk home to where she lives. He's saying he's going to reorganise the police to make women feel safer. I'd like to know how he intends to do that and to get across to the women that they are safer with all the bad publicity that the police have had recently.
Now, of course, in London, one of the big issues that people are having issue with, one of the big debates is, of course, the expansion of ULEZ. Pete, are you concerned that the likes of clean air zones and ULEZ might expand more around the country, and we might well see one here in Wolverhampton?
I think it's inevitable. As you say, clean air zones in Birmingham already. 1 or 2 other places have been earmarked for them. For me, they're taxing the wrong people. These are going to hit the people who can't afford to upgrade their vehicles. In central London, if you can afford to live there, you're going to have a car which is 3 to 5 years old. The people who are going to be hit are the ones who can't afford to change their cars.
And Linda, you said your daughter doesn't drive in London and she relies on public transport. Has ULEZ got a point in that position?
Well, it still has a point in that if you're getting workmen out to the house, it's increasing costs. For the people who want a plumber to come or an electrician, they're going to be paying more money. So the general public, again, are paying more money. So again, it just seems to be a stealth tax in whichever area it's in.
All right, thank you so much to all of our panel. Some big questions there, Tom, for your guests today.
Well, Jack, thank you very much for those questions. We'll be putting them to our guests a little bit later. And of course, if you at home want to get involved in the People's Panel, remember the address to visit is gbnews.com/panel. But let's get now to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and the Member of Parliament for Plymouth Moorview, Johnny Mercer. Johnny, thank you for making the time for us this morning. I don't know if you managed to catch any of what our People's Panel was saying there, but I was interested in what both David and Pete were saying about the competence of the government, really. Is this a zombie government that has failed to do things like stopping the boats, that's raised taxes? What is this government actually achieving?
Good morning, Tom, and thank you for that. I mean, I did catch at the end of it, and look, I think it's very easy, isn't it, to look at what's gone on, and obviously it's been a very difficult time, the Conservative Party, and we're on our 3rd or 4th Prime Minister now, and look at it in that direction. Absolutely, and I understand that, and I understand people feeling that. I really do. There are always two sides to this story. And actually, I sit here this morning, I think, what has this government done? I look at people in Plymouth who are £3,300 better off on their energy bills because of specific interventions by this government. The long-term plan for staffing in the NHS, that remains a huge challenge in Plymouth. If I look at my space and what we've done on Veterans Affairs, for the first time, we've got a dedicated mental health care pathway for veterans in this country. We're ending veterans homelessness this year. So look, I respect these views, of course I do. And I think we have to work harder to make people really feel those benefits and feel that stuff is being done. But I don't think, the characterization that we've seen of the government this morning is fair. Of course I don't. But people are more than entitled to their opinions. And as politicians, we listen to them and then get our nose to the grindstone and keep working for people who elect us.
Of course, the reason why this might be pertinent this morning, perhaps more than other mornings, is that last night we saw a pretty scathing attack on the government from one of your colleagues in Parliament, from someone you sat around the cabinet table with back under Boris Johnson's government. Nadine Dorries has not held back. She's called Rishi Sunak a failing Prime Minister. What are your thoughts on her resignation letter?
Well, look, Nadine said she was going to resign. I think it's good that she has resigned now, and that the process in mid-beds can continue. Look, I'm always very sad, I think, when these things are played out in public. She's written a very personal letter to the Prime Minister, and as again is her right. I think that you take some aspects in there that I'm familiar with. Defence spending. She talks about defence spending being cut. I mean, it's just fundamentally not the case. And when I started in Parliament, £38 billion a year, it's just under £50 billion a year now. This Prime Minister, when he was Chancellor, actually signed off the biggest settlement for defence since the end of the Cold War. So, recollections may vary on some of these policies. But look, she's entitled to her view. I think we have the by-election now. We've got a good candidate in Mid-Bedfordshire, and, we look forward to the by-election.
I suppose what she's saying might strike a tone with some people. The size of the army is smaller than it has been in a very, very long time, perhaps in centuries. Does Nadine Dorries not have a point that certainly in a lot of these areas it feels like there's been regression?
So I think when it comes to numbers in the army, and in the military, it's all about lethality, isn't it, in the military? The military's there to do a very clear job. And the truth is now that we have more capability, more ability to project force at reach further around the globe with better technology and better equipment than we've ever had before. And, I've been very clear and straight down the line, whether I'm in government or out of government, on where we are on issues. And that is the fact of the matter. You cannot judge the UK military simply on numbers. And, to say we've reduced spending is simply not the case. And, we have to keep pace with the changing nature of warfare and actually meet those threats. But Nadine is entitled to her view. I think it's very sad when these things play out in public. She's written a very personal letter to the Prime Minister that I didn't really get all the way through because it went on for quite a while. But I think we just, it is what it is. I think we need to move forward. We need to get a new candidate into Mid-Bedfordshire, and I think we can run a good campaign, and things are slowly beginning to turn around.
Just lastly and very briefly on this area, will Parliament be poorer for not having Nadine Dorries there? Will you miss her presence there personally?
Look, I think historically Nadine has added a real value to Parliament, and I value all of my colleagues and their stories and their backgrounds that they represent. Absolutely, but no one's bigger than no one's. I mean, you're talking to a guy who's been sacked from government twice, right? And no one's bigger than the party. The party is there, and the national interest is there to deliver for the people of Britain who go out and vote for it at general elections. And of course, from time to time, everybody will feel unhappy with what has happened now. I think, it's regrettable that Nadine's gone down the sort of personal route, which is, but that is her right. She's been a Conservative MP for some time. She's resigned now. She said she would resign. We're going to have a by-election in Mid-Bedfordshire. I think everyone's kind of tired of raking over the coals of that Boris Johnson premiership. I think it was extremely difficult time for many of us. We just need to get on with the pitch as it currently is now and deliver for people in the UK who expect us to show that delivery by the time of the next election.
It feels like you might have been walking along a tightrope during that question, Johnny Mercer, but we must get to what you're here to actually talk about, which is, of course, how the government's resettlement programme is going for Afghan refugees. What's your update today?
Well, look, Tom, we have worked really hard over the summer. The Prime Minister asked me to look at this in April, May time, getting these Afghans who we relocated and we have a duty to after the evacuation from Operation Pitting from the collapse of Afghanistan. We're up to around 25,000 people now we've relocated. The vast majority of those are in settled accommodation. Yes, it's been difficult. It's a really difficult policy area. They spent too long in hotels, many of these people, and we've had to put a deadline on that to get people out of hotels. But we've matched that with a really generous offer. My team have worked around the clock over the summer. We're housing 400 people a week. We've generated 1,000 homes. We've changed thousands of lives across the country for Afghans who've come here at the end of Pitting this summer. I'm really proud of the efforts, and I hope we can continue to support this special cohort.
Do you not think that it somehow undermines all of the effort that is going on for those Afghan legitimate refugees, that 400 are being housed every week, as you say, when on some days more than 400 on a single day arrive from various countries by small boat on England's southern coast?
Look, Tom, there is... I have a very dim view, I'm afraid, of those who are undertaking that journey. It's incredibly dangerous. There is no requirement to leave France. You can apply for the ARAP scheme, the Afghan Relocation Assistance Policy Scheme. You can apply to that from a third country. There is no requirement for these individuals to cross the channel on small boats. The government is entirely right to see what is going on and do everything possible in its power. It's obviously a really difficult policy area because people have talked about it and you talked about it a lot over the years. This year's the first year you've seen a 15% reduction in that. So, measures are taking place and having some effects, but it's really, really difficult. I think what people want to see from their government is a Prime Minister who's
Johnny, I'm afraid we're going to have to get to a break, but I do want to ask you one final question. In a word, Johnny Mercer, will you be having...
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. There's a bit of a mixed bag throughout today. Whilst high pressure is just about close by in the Atlantic, it's going to be more of a presence as we head into Monday. In the meantime, we've still got a few systems to watch out for, particularly this front in the west will be gradually pushing into Northern Ireland later today, turning quite cloudy with some drizzly and light patchy rain, bit of a damp day here. Elsewhere, there is some sunshine to be had, but the showers that have started off in the west will gradually push their way eastwards as we head throughout the day, generally persisting across the spine of the country. Some of those could be on the sharp side, maybe with some isolated thunderstorms. Temperatures climbing towards 22 degrees Celsius in the southeast, but that cloud across Northern Ireland really going to hold temperatures back closer to 15, 17 degrees Celsius here. And that rain will gradually push its way eastwards as we head into this evening. So a bit of a better end to the day for Northern Ireland, but for Scotland, parts of Western England and Wales, it's going to start to turn cloudy with some light and drizzly rain. Generally clearer skies further east, a bit of mist and fog possible, but most places holding up around 12 degrees Celsius as we start off Monday morning. For those of us lucky enough to have the bank holiday Monday off, it should be a relatively fine day overall, but there is still going to be this legacy of the cloud from that frontal system. The rain will be petering its way out, can't rule out some showers, but still a bit of cloud around. Sunnier spells for Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Wales, Western England, and temperatures generally around where they should be, 18 to 22 degrees Celsius.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. As you might have noticed, I'm not Camilla Tominey. My name's Tom Harwood. I'm standing in for a final time this summer. Now, in just a minute, I'll be speaking to the Defence Committee Chairman, Tobias Ellwood. Should the UK be giving fighter jets to Ukraine? And is our army too small? All that and so much more to come. Stay tuned after the news with Lisa Hartle.
At 10 o'clock, I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB Newsroom. Nadine Dorries says the Prime Minister has whipped up a public frenzy against her as she announced her resignation. In a blistering attack, the former minister accused Rishi Sunak of demeaning his office by criticising her and said his actions had left 200 or more of her MP colleagues facing an electoral tsunami. A by-election will now take place in the usually safe Tory seat of Mid-Bedfordshire. Labour's Shadow Secretary for Women and Equalities, Annalise Dodds, told GB News that Nadine Dorries makes some valid points.
Although I disagree with Nadine Dorries on many things, when she says that we currently have a zombie parliament, and when she asks what Rishi Sunak stands for and what he's achieved, I think many people will be saying they don't understand either. And I think this is incredibly damaging when, as we know, our country's in the middle of a cost of living crisis. We have a crisis in our NHS, crisis of crime on our streets, and yet we seem to have a zombie government that just can't get a grip.
A breach in the Met Police's IT system could cause incalculable damage in the wrong hands, according to the Police Federation. Scotland Yard says it's aware of unauthorised access to the IT system of one of its suppliers. They're now working with the company to ascertain whether data may have been breached. The company had access to names, ranks, photos, vetting levels and pay numbers, but not personal details such as addresses. Whole life orders without parole could become the norm for dangerous offenders under plans announced by the Prime Minister. The law would also enforce such sentences for sexually motivated murders. Rishi Sunak says people rightly expect that in the most serious cases there should be a guarantee that life will mean life. Labour said failed government policies had led to overcrowded prisons, accusing the Tories of being soft on crime. 3 US Marines were killed and 5 others injured after a helicopter crash in northern Australia. 23 personnel were on board when the aircraft crashed during a routine exercise on the remote Melville Island off the coast of Darwin. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese described the situation as tragic. A spokesperson for Donald Trump claims he's raised nearly £4 million on Friday, the single highest 24-hour period of the campaign to date. The former president's Save America fundraising committee is selling items via an online store, using his indictments to rally support among his base. Shirts, posters and stickers with mugshots on are available for sale, many of which include the phrase "Never Surrender." Donald Trump is facing 13 counts related to his attempt to overturn the 2020 US election. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Tom Harwood.
Thanks, Lisa. Tom Harwood here covering for Camilla Tominey. Now, in just a moment, we're going to hear from the chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood. After the supposed death of the Wagner Group's chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, I'll speak to Vladimir Putin's former number 2 in the Kremlin, the former Prime Minister of Russia, Mikhail Kasyanov. And with just 2 days to go before the ULEZ zone is extended to outer London, I'll get the thoughts of the Reform Party's candidate to be London Mayor, Howard Cox. All that and Bill Clinton's former special counsel in the White House joins us to discuss, well, you guessed it, that Donald Trump mugshot. But let's get to the big story of the week in some respects, of course. It's been rumbling on for quite some time. Is Prigozhin dead? Let's get the views of Tobias Ellwood, chair of the Defence Select Committee and the Conservative MP for Bournemouth East. Tobias, thank you for making the time for us this morning. Before we get into what's going on further afield, I do just want a quick reflection on your shared time in Parliament with Nadine Dorries. Will she be missed?
I thought you might begin with that question. It's been an undignified chapter, I'm afraid. What she's done has been self-serving. It's been distracting to delay, her resignation in this way. I don't really want to spend a lot of airtime on this, if I may. The episode of colleagues throwing their teddies in the corner, in this case for simply not getting a peerage, has been messy. It's been embarrassing for both the Parliament and specifically to our party. So I'm pleased we're now able to move on. Whatever you do in Parliament, whatever positions you take, must firstly be in the country's interests, and then secondly in the party's interests. And what she and others have done recently fails on both accounts. How you conduct yourself in moments of difficulty or disappointment actually exposes. And delaying this resignation was designed, we know, to maximise harm to the Prime Minister. I'm pleased that this sort of selfish charade is now over. The party can now move forward, and we pick up the pieces and we repair. We have a fantastic candidate now in Festus Akinboysoy, and I believe we will retain the seat. We were drawing a line on what's happened in the past. Rishi Sunak can consolidate. We're expecting a reshuffle soon. Provide his stall for where we're going to take the country after a very difficult period over the last, 5 to 10 years with COVID and with Ukraine absolutely affecting our economy. And we've not heard anything from Labour, I have to say. They've just benefited from the fact that we've had these distractions on the front pages. Let's now draw a line. Let's now move on. Let's win that by-election in Bedfordshire.
You mentioned Keir Starmer seems to have been a fairly lucky general in the last year or so with his opponents. I suppose one person who was a less lucky general was Mr. Prigozhin, who may or may not have met a rather sticky end in the skies of Moscow last week. What is your view, firstly, on whether or not Mr. Prigozhin is alive or dead?
Well, I have huge respect for the British intelligence services. They work very closely with our American counterparts, the Five Eyes community as well. I'm sure behind the scenes they've been working carefully, listening, GCHQ, putting all their thoughts together. When they come out and say that that they presume that he's dead, then I think that's effectively that's good enough for me. The more important point is then what happens. This curious character and where this goes with President Putin. He spent 23 years sort of consolidating his power base, popular from the start, don't forget, because he turned the Russian economy around after the collapse of the Soviet Union. No one could touch him. But after that attempted mutiny in June, Putin realized that the Wagner group had to be brought down. Don't forget, this is the group, his private army, and he placed Prigozhin, his former close friend, in charge to do his dirty work abroad, propping up dictators in Africa, for example, stealing their gold in Sudan, certainly, to pay for these wars. And the frustration with Prigozhin and what was going on with the inept decision-making in Ukraine, he turned his tanks on Moscow. And this is the critical point. This private army charging toward Moscow, and there was no Russian force able to stop him. Only a deal in exile was able to allow this to actually, to end. And Prigozhin also took that southern city of Rostov-on-Don, if you remember. They cheered him in the streets. So Putin is now in a very, very dangerous position. He's going to want to consolidate his base. But for me, this is the beginning of the end of President Putin.
Is that, in your view, why it took 2 months for this apparent assassination to take place? Does this reveal that Vladimir Putin is perhaps less secure sitting in his grand palatial places of residence than he was perhaps a year ago?
Yeah, no, he very much is weakened. This is the most challenging period in his 23 years in power. When you resort to eliminating dissenting voices on the scale of which he's doing, because it's not just Prigozhin, there's other generals as well, other big players, stakeholders in Russia that have mostly been thrown out of windows or fallen off balconies. When trust in the inner Kremlin circle has disappeared, then you are in.
Seem to have a little communications error there. I believe we might be able to get Tobias Ellwood back very, very shortly, but it was fascinating what he was saying about how this assassination, far from being a show of strength from Vladimir Putin, in fact reveals key weaknesses in the Russian president's leadership, and that this may well be the beginning of the end for Vladimir Putin. I suppose that asks two questions. One, what does that lead to Ukraine? And number two, who might replace him? I believe we have Tobias Ellwood back with us now. And Tobias, I do want to dig deeper into this question of Ukraine, because we've started to see other countries in Europe offer fighter jets to that country. And whereas perhaps under the leadership of Boris Johnson, the United Kingdom was on the front foot in supporting Ukraine, it does see when it comes to the supply of jets, the United Kingdom is actually behind countries like the Netherlands and some of the Scandinavian countries.
I understand that argument. I don't fully agree with it, simply because you have to send in the right military equipment, what makes sense for the Ukrainians to use. When they have such a mixture, if you like, of kit coming their way, it all comes with procurement and supply chain lines and so forth, the different types of training. So we need to consolidate around single platforms which the Ukrainian fighter pilots, MiGs and Sukhoi, can easily jump into and fly. The F-16 is the clear favorite. That's what they want. And just as like the Leopard tank is the key one. Now, we gave our Challenger tanks, but that was political. That was a bold move by the Conservative Party, by Rishi Sunak, and then it encouraged other countries to step forward. Our leadership here has been quite phenomenal, I have to say. Everybody's been very risk averse at the beginning. Do you remember defensive, offensive, weapon system debates and so forth? We sent in NLAWs, we've sent in, Storm Shadow missiles. We're training them on Salisbury Plain, and then those tanks came in as well. We've done a lot to move this forward. It is for other nations to recognize that it's the F-16 that is now required. This gives the top cover to the tanks when they do those counter-offensive moves to try and break through Russian lines.
What do you say to those who say that the United Kingdom seems to be taking a step back when it comes to a leadership role in international affairs, that Rishi Sunak is not the same sort of global statesman, perhaps, in one form or other, that Boris Johnson was, that he's perhaps less interested in foreign affairs?
No, I think it's the other way around, I'm afraid. We saw in the last few years Britain retreating from the international stage. Whatever your views are on Brexit, the way that was interpreted across the world was us looking inwards, not looking outwards. And that's how natural, that's in our DNA. That's what Britain does. We normally step forward as a nation when others hesitate. We have an understanding of...
It does seem that we're having a little bit of a trouble with this line, but that, of course, was Tobias Ellwood, the chairman of the Defence Select Committee. Fascinating, though, his view that Brexit was seen to be something that had the United Kingdom stepping back. I think there's another strong argument in that line that, in fact, the withdrawal from the European Union made the United Kingdom perhaps more willing to step up in other ways, that it made the United Kingdom perhaps more willing to lead that international coalition on with regard to defending Ukraine when Russia invaded last February. But let's move on now, because, of course, it's not just foreign affairs, but also rather more parochial ones that have hit the papers this morning. Of course, the ULEZ zone in the coming week will be extended to outer London. And I'm delighted to be joined by one man who has been resolute in his opposition to this. Howard Cox is the Reform Party's candidate for the Mayor of London. And Howard, thank you for joining us this morning on the programme. First of all, whilst viewers of GB News and quite a few people across the country will know who you are, know the campaigns that you have run, to people who don't know you, who are you and why are you running to be Mayor of London?
It's a very good question, Tom, and sometimes I don't know what can't answer that. On a serious note, though, what's happened is that I've got 1.7 million supporters in a campaign called Fair Fuel UK, which you're fully aware of, and we managed to get fuel duty frozen for 13 years. In fact, it actually went down 6p in that time, so I'm quite proud of that. Otherwise, drivers will be paying something like 80 pence more at the pumps for diesel and petrol. So I feel as though I've actually been quite successful. I've worked very closely with MPs right across, including people like Robert Halfon MP, who was Mr Fair Fuel UK in Parliament. And what's really happened in the last year is that with the this ULEZ Stalag tax, as I call it, people have approached me and said simply this: will you stand against this man? And I said no 2 or 3 times, but I was approached by Richard Tice of the Reform Party, and he convinced me. And I have to say to you, for 50 years of my life, I'm 68 years of age, 50 years I voted Tory, but I'm afraid I'm not voting Tory this time because they've moved away and they've allowed drivers to be... There's so many anti-driver policies led by Sadiq Khan in London, absolutely demonstratively unfairly.
What's the difference between you and the Conservative candidate in this mayoral election, Susan Hall? She's been on this programme, she's been under the same sort of scrutiny that you are now. Why should someone vote for you rather than her if they're anti-ULEZ? Doesn't that split the vote?
Yes, it probably will split the vote, and I'd be happy to offer Susan Hall deputy mayorship. There's no problem with that whatsoever. But seriously, the important thing is that I will be getting rid of all ULEZ, not just the extension, the ULEZ which goes to the North and South Circular, and the central ULEZ. If it's done its job, we don't need it anymore. London emissions have rocketed downwards. And we've got to recognise that there's no point in hitting people more in the pocket. And that's what this government is doing, and also what Sadiq Khan's doing. And Susan Hall's only going to be stopping. In fact, as we stand today, before ULEZ extension coming out on Tuesday, Susan is going to leave things alone. I'm going to get rid of low traffic networks, 20-mile-an-hour zones, all those sorts of things. I'm sorry to say, cyclists are listening to this, I'm going to get rid of some of the excessively huge cycle lanes too.
You're going to get rid of some cycle lanes? Are you going to not build any new cycle lanes? Is this going to become a car-centric city?
It's going to get big. What we need to do is to get this city we say motoring, but moving again. One of the problems we have, we've got huge congestion. Cycling is, I want to encourage. I've got no problem with that about that, but I think it's gone over the top. There's too much pushing towards cycling and away from the motorists, and particularly the commercial aspect of the driving. You know, white van man, you know, we've got the sole traders. They're being hit hardest in this situation. And HGV drivers, they are being penalised. And what we need to do is have some way of incentivising clean fuel technology so that everyone will benefit.
Now, on our People's Panel a little bit earlier in the programme, you might have seen that Linda, one of the members of the panel, had been looking at your policy prospectus. Her daughter lives in London, and she was thinking not just, of course, about you, Les, but about the safety issues in our capital city. How would you make London safer?
Yes, I want people to be aware I'm not a one-trick pony. It's not just for motorists, etc. I couldn't agree more. I have a daughter who's 31 years of age, lives in London too, and she's subjected to the same problems. At any one time, there's only bobbies on the beat. There's only about 5% to 10% actually walking the streets of London. That's 90% that aren't. And yet we've got bobbies, that many amount of bobbies. Now, I'm going to triple the number of bobbies, which essentially moves...
How would you fund that?
Well, that's a good question. And but one of the things is, obviously, I've got to look at what the black hole deficit I'm going to inherit from... It's huge. He's got a £20 billion budget. But every single policeman I talk to is saying to you, you've only got to get us away from behind the desk and we'll come out. It's not going to be a huge expenditure. But one of the bigger initiatives that I'm suggesting is that we need to help with the safety aspect of this, is to create public police access points in 24-hour outlets like supermarkets or McDonald's and places like that, which will be booths where policemen are manned, and hopefully I can convince Tesco's and people like that to actually fund it, because it's good for them, because it's going to stop shoplifting. But be places for people to go to feel safer and hopefully deter crooks. But the other thing, which is very interesting indeed, 5G broadband is very bad in Greater London. So we need to get that really up and running, really much more effective, because then someone pressing their phone can get to the police and get to help quickly as well. It's those sorts of things I'm looking at.
Some people listening might think you're a very effective campaigner against higher taxation. You've campaigned very successfully about keeping fuel duty down. And here, Les, many people would describe it as a sort of stealth tax, or perhaps less stealthy of a tax, a revenue-raising mechanism anyway. And if you're getting rid of revenue-raising mechanisms, but want to expand the size of the police force and want to spend money on getting 5G to more areas, how do you raise the money?
Well, you just said something about expand the police force. No, I'm talking about getting those people stuck behind the desks, you know, monitoring tweets and things like that, instead of going out, walking the streets, making people feel, hey, I feel safe, I can walk down the street. So there is the money revenue raising is an important question to ask, but what we should be
redeploying police. I want to get onto the Notting Hill Carnival, of course, happening this weekend. Your Conservative opponent has said that the Notting Hill Carnival police officers dread it, it's unsafe, it perhaps should be moved. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I have to say, I'm not trying to avoid answering that question. I have no feelings really about that. I mean, it's a carnival which is, ever since I've been around, you know, on this planet, has been there. It's been good. And most of the time, it's been very successful. It is sometimes overtaken by some bad people who make it worse, and there's things that happen. But I'm not like Susan Hall, that I think, you know, that police dread it. They're doing their job.
Interestingly, Ken Livingstone once suggested moving that carnival as well. So perhaps there's some greater, I don't know, intra-party connections there. But I do want to move on to something that we've done with all of the mayoral candidates who've been on this show. You might have been expecting it, our quick-fire yes-no questions. So please try to answer in just yes or no. We'll start with more stop and search by the police.
Yes.
Should the two-child cap on benefits be lifted?
No.
Should the UK leave the ECHR?
Yes.
Should we bring back the death penalty?
No.
Should the Circle Line be a circle?
What a question, Tom.
Of all the ones to stump you, I didn't think it would be that one.
Well, no. Yes.
Yes. Is the climate change agenda a hoax?
Yes.
Is net zero, should that be happening?
No.
Is climate change itself a hoax?
No, climate change is not a hoax. I can't say yes or no to that because I don't think... my point in this is I don't think it's a crisis, but we do need to actually involve ourselves in actually helping in terms of setting up anti-pollution measures. But don't blame the motorists every time.
I'm going to give you a fail for yes or no on that question. Okay. Should abortion laws be less liberal in the United Kingdom?
Yes.
Should the state provide universal free school meals for every child?
No.
Do you support gay marriage?
Yes.
Are vigilantes right to attack ULEZ cameras?
No.
Was Boris Johnson a good mayor of London?
Yes.
Was Boris Johnson a good prime minister?
No.
And was the last United States presidential election legitimate?
No.
Would Donald Trump make a good president again?
Thanks, Tom, for that one. Can I get can I sit on the fence on that one?
You can sit on the fence on that. And is Joe Biden a legitimate US president?
But based on the previous answer, I don't think he is, no.
And finally, should the top rate of tax, 45%, be abolished?
Yes.
Howard Cox, you have been admirably candid on many of those questions. Thank you so much for joining us here on GB News. And, of course, we will be trying to submit all of the challenges to the London Mayoralty to the same sort of process. Thank you very much for your time, Howard Cox. Let's get the views now of our People's Panel back in Wolverhampton. What have they made of the interviews so far? Jack Carson is there for us. Jack, do people feel like their questions have been answered?
Well, welcome back to Wolverhampton. Welcome back to the Medicine Bakery. Here we've got our People's Panel, Linda, Pete and William with us. Linda, let's start with you because, of course, your question was for Howard Cox. We've just heard him there. What did you make of his comments? Because you were particularly concerned about the safety of your daughter in London, weren't you?
I've got to say, I really agreed with everything that he was saying. I'm very much of a generation that grew up in that if you had a problem, you asked a policeman because they were on the beat. And that was one of the things he was quite clear on, that he would be bringing the police outside of the police station and putting them back on the beat. And that makes you feel more secure when you see them out and about. At the moment, you very rarely actually see policemen out and about. So I think he had an excellent point with that.
What do you make about the idea that he said about kind of having these areas where there would be a policeman manned that people could go to for help and support when they might need? What do you make of that idea, to have kind of these separate areas, like a McDonald's, like he said, 24 hours for people to go to if they felt unsafe?
I think that's a good idea as well, because there'll be many people out, not necessarily just women, that sometimes feel, I mean, you hear of young men having, you know, having fights and problems, somewhere where they can easily get to, that's well lit, and a lot of these places are 24 hours in London, then that's a good idea. Any kind of safety zone is a good idea.
Fantastic. Pete, of course, we had Johnny Mercer on. He was talking, answering your question, really, about whether this felt like a zombie government, referring to, of course, Nadine Dorries' comments in her resignation letter. Do you feel like he answered your question?
No, as expected, just more rhetoric. They're sitting back. They almost have given up the ghost now, I think. The 5 pledges are out the window. If they want to do something, do something. If they want to stop the small boats, stop the small boats. Let's see some action from the government instead of just rhetoric all the time.
So would action be the thing that would instill more confidence in you as a Prime Minister, as Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister?
Absolutely. He's been in office almost 12 months. The Tory government have been in office for 13 years. We want to see them actually doing something. I used to vote Labour. I actually voted for this current Conservative government. I want them to do what we, as the people, want them to do. Represent us.
William, of course, your question was about immigration. Do you feel more confident that the government is taking this seriously? How do you feel about your concerns on that issue?
I have no confidence whatsoever. Empty words, empty promises. So I don't know what's going to happen. So I just don't know what they're going to do about it.
Of course, Johnny Mercer was picking up particularly on the Afghan resettlement scheme and saying that they don't have to cross the channel, they can apply for that in a third country. Do you feel like that was much of an answer to your question of how to stop the incentive of people coming across the channel?
To a certain extent, yes. But what my question would have been would be why couldn't they settle in the first safe country they entered rather than travelling through various countries to France to come over to the UK?
Okay, that's very much a view that I think a lot of people would take as well. And just quickly, Pete, Howard Cox was talking there about having a more kind of pro-driver policy within London. Do you think that's actually a policy that needs to be adopted countrywide as well?
Absolutely. Howard was the only person on there who actually spoke sense today. He had some real policies, some real ideas, and hopefully as Mayor of London, if he does beat Khan to the finish line, we'll see some changes.
I mean, do you worry that Wolverhampton could be next for a clean air zone?
I think it's almost inevitable. This is going to be pushed out as saving the planet. It's not only about pollution, it's about keeping our carbon footprint down, which I understand. But again, as Howard was saying, there's a lot of talk about saving the planet. We're making very little impact. This is nature. The temperature changes. It's weather.
Thank you so much to all of our panel, Linda, Pete and William, for joining us here from Wolverhampton today. Lots of good points there made by our panellists, and I think Howard Cox has probably come out better from the guests today.
Well, Jack, thank you so much for bringing us that from Wolverhampton. And of course, if you want to join the GB News People's Panel for the Camilla Tominey Show, you can go to gbnews.com/panel. We're always travelling around the country every single weekend. Now, don't go anywhere. In just a moment, I'll be discussing that Donald Trump mugshot and indeed the wider presidential race with a man who has dealt with his fair share of presidential scandal. Lanny Davis was the attorney who served as Bill Clinton's special counsel in the White House. He's also represented Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney. It'll be a fascinating interview. Don't go anywhere.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Through the rest of Sunday, we've got a mixture of scattered showers, some outbreaks of rain, but there will be a few brighter breaks in places. And looking at the bigger picture, high pressure sits to the southwest of us, bit of a cool northwesterly flow bringing in showers and outbreaks of rain over the next couple of days. For Sunday afternoon, quite a lot of cloud out there. The best of any brighter, sunnier spells will be across eastern areas. However, this will then help trigger a few heavy showers, so do watch out for these. Central areas generally quite dry, though rather cloudy, and then across the far west we'll see patchy rain pushing in from the Atlantic. Temperatures on the cool side, generally the high teens to low 20s, with generally a light northwesterly breeze. Into the evening time, this band of patchy rain just continues to slowly push eastwards as we end the day and into the early hours of Monday morning. One or two sharp showers developing on it as it breaks up, and then clearer spells following on behind. Temperatures on the fresh side, low double figures in towns and cities, single figures in the countryside. But it means a brighter start to Monday morning, some sunny spells, a few showers initially, but then a fairly bright day to come. Plenty of sunny spells across England and Wales. A little cloudier for Northern Ireland and Scotland, a few showers here, and a few of these then filtering in across England and Wales as the cloud bubbles up into the afternoon. A bit more sunshine around, temperatures lifting a little higher into the low 20s.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. My name's Tom Harwood, and we're not just talking about what's going on in the United Kingdom today, but also overseas, because this is something that will have implications for the wider world too. The machinations in United States politics, and indeed the latest indictment and mugshot of former President Donald Trump. Let's speak now to Lanny Davis, the former special counsel to President Bill Clinton and the lawyer representing Donald Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, in the Stormy Daniels case. Lanny, thank you so much for making the time for us this morning, rather earlier for you in New York. So thank you for getting up for us. I suppose, first of all, you, of course, represented Bill Clinton in a number of sticky situations when he was president. How does Donald Trump's trials and tribulations compare to some of the legal difficulties of Bill Clinton?
So there's obviously some dispute about this statement, but Bill Clinton faced a political situation involving a relationship with a young woman. There was never anything illegal. He was accused of committing perjury, so that was a legal charge, but he actually told the truth and he testified before the grand jury. Unlike Donald Trump, who refused, the grand jury is set up as a jury to determine whether someone should be indicted. He not only agreed to testify, he testified on national and international live television and told the truth about the relationship, which of course was very embarrassing for him and his family. So it wasn't a legal issue, it was a political issue. This is a legal issue. 4 separate grand juries picked from citizenry, similar to Great Britain's system, voted after hearing evidence for indictments, meaning probable cause that crimes have been committed. So they're vastly different situations.
Now, of course, you're involved in the Stormy Daniels case in New York, so perhaps we won't go into the details there. But why is it that some people say that the Georgia indictment is the most politically dangerous for Donald Trump?
Well, the Georgia indictment is a brilliant use of a statute passed many years ago to capture and convict organized crime families, where you couldn't get individuals because they were all sworn to silence, but you could allege an enterprise, a conspiracy, and using that device called a RICO, Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization Act, the organized crime families in New York were convicted by none other than Rudy Giuliani, who's now being indicted. It's kind of ironic. So that's the criminal statute that the Georgia prosecutor has utilized. And just to remind your British viewers, Donald Trump claims to be running for president so he can get elected and pardon himself. So even if he's convicted, he can pardon himself and he will never have to suffer. That doesn't apply in the states because we have state governments different from the federal government. He can't pardon himself from a conviction of a state crime in Georgia or the one that I'm involved in New York. If he's convicted of either of those jurisdictions' crimes, he cannot pardon himself. And after he's president, if he's elected, God forbid from my perspective, he will go to prison or at least will be convicted if the jury determines that, because he cannot pardon himself.
It is fascinating to see that as these indictments have sort of piled up, as the charges have piled up against Donald Trump, indeed as his mugshot has been taken at a county jail, as this has happened, amongst Republicans, Donald Trump's favourability seems to have risen. His poll ratings amongst Republicans seem to have risen. Clearly, there is a large proportion of voters in the United States who believe this is nothing more than a political prosecution.
Well, first, let's do the math, and you'll decide whether the word large is an accurate word. In the United States, if you ask any sample of the population, about 30% of the population of America will say they're Republicans. About 30% will say they're Democrats. Interestingly, they're about equal. And the rest, about 40%, call themselves independents. They're the swing voters that really determine the general election for president. So if you take the 30% that identify themselves as Republicans, then polls will show 90% will stay with Trump no matter what. Now do the math. 90 times 30 is 27% of America. And that leaves 63% not voting for Trump. So the large is only large as part of a minority. And you have the same issue in Great Britain, where you have parties and percentages, but they don't represent the general electorate who votes for members of parliament. So that's really the difference in America, too. He still is got a ceiling, and he's not likely to capture those swing voters, those independents, if he's indicted and he does what he does, which is to play with the truth. And that mugshot is not exactly a mugshot that will win swing voters. It will win that 27% hard Republican base, but not much beyond that.
But why is it that that's 27%, that those who identify with the Republican Party, who have registered as Republicans, why is it that they are so convinced that this is a political persecution, that these are political decisions, that perhaps particularly, most notably in New York, this is dredging stuff up from the past to go after a political opponent, in their view?
So forgive my disclosed bias. I'm the lawyer for Michael Cohen, who worked for Donald Trump for 10 years. He went to prison pleading to what you just, and I'm not criticizing you, you're reflecting American journalism, described as a political prosecution involving a porn star. So it's about sex and it's really not serious. Let's remember that the federal prosecutors working for Donald Trump in New York, federal prosecutors of the federal government, the Federal Justice Department under Donald Trump, prosecuted Michael Cohen for exactly the same crime of paying someone to stay silent so the American people didn't know about the affair. They called that crime a serious danger to democracy, and they sent Mr. Cohen to prison. Now, Trump didn't say that was a political prosecution. Cohen was targeted, the only person prosecuted in this whole organization, and the federal prosecutors working for Donald Trump. This is a fact in writing, in public, said Donald Trump directed Michael Cohen to do that crime. So how can it be political for Donald Trump when he directs Michael Cohen and he goes to prison for the crime, where it's not political. If you say, Mr. Trump, you directed somebody to do a crime before you were president, we're going to prosecute you.
I suppose some might say that by extension, going after Michael Cohen was also a political move. But of course, this is all.
He pled guilty. Excuse me for interrupting, but he wouldn't, even Michael Cohen wouldn't agree with you. He pled guilty because it was a crime. It wasn't political. He paid money to keep somebody quiet to influence an election. There is a statute in America that says if you do that, if you pay someone to stay silent to influence an election, that's a crime. Michael Cohen pled guilty. There's nothing political about it. He violated the law and he pled guilty. The really ironic question is that if Donald Trump, according to his own prosecutors, let me repeat, these are prosecutors working for Trump during the Trump administration, indicted and forced Michael Cohen to plead guilty. If he was directed to do that crime by Mr. Trump, there's nothing political about Mr. Trump being held accountable. That's what the New York case is about.
No, it's a fascinating situation where you have almost two different parallel narratives living in the United States. Do you think that Donald Trump could actually end up behind bars, could actually be in a prison at the end of this process?
So let me just answer. I know we're running out of time. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm an Anglophile. I wrote my thesis about Winston Churchill being right on Gallipoli. Those of you who are historians will know that most people disagree with that view, but I'm a great fan of the UK, and I say hello to all my friends. So first of all, I am not in favor of a former president being put behind bars. I am strongly critical of Donald Trump. But I believe it's very important in Great Britain, and our system is modeled and derived from common law in the UK. Every person should be held to the same standard, whether you're, as we say over here, no man is above the law, but we mean no person because no woman is above the law. So the principle that he should be held accountable for violating the same crime that Michael Cohen committed, when he deletes tape of national security information, our nuclear program he had and took with him, and he didn't hold it in security, and then he deleted the tapes showing that, that's a crime. At least he needs to be tried and held to the same standard. So the principle is no man is above the law, no woman is above the law, but I'm not in favor of putting him in jail. I'm in favor of the principle that we're all the same, whether you're a former president or a citizen.
That's a fascinating distinction, not to go in prison, presumably some form of house arrest you'd favour there. But a really interesting point to raise there. Someone so implacably opposed to Trump, not thinking he should actually end up behind bars. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And I hope that, well, at least I've done my best to put across challenging points that the Republicans in the United States are saying. And I hope that we've got both sides of the story there.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And good morning to all my friends in the UK.
Lanny, it's been a pleasure. Well, coming up on the show, I'll be speaking to a man who knows Vladimir Putin better than most people. His former number 2 in the Kremlin and the former Prime Minister of Russia, Mikhail Kasyanov. Don't go anywhere.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. My name's Tom Harwood, and in many ways we've been saving the best for last today. Of course, we've been talking a lot about international affairs. That's what we tend to do over the summer when it comes to the British political process. But I am really delighted to say that we can offer a heavyweight of world affairs today. Mikhail Kasyanov is the former Prime Minister of Russia. He served from the year 2000 to 2004. Mikhail, thank you so much for joining us this morning. First of all, I know that you are someone who knew Vladimir Putin well. You have obviously not been aligned with Vladimir Putin for many, many years. Do you fear for your own life?
Oh, that is the question absolutely easy to answer. For many years, I feel fear. And just last year, when Putin started this criminal war against Ukraine, my criticism appeared to be as a criminal case. And that's why I had to escape, as many of my collaborators and as many other Russians who are not supporting Mr. Putin, who condemned just this Putin's so-called special operation, but it's full-scale war against sovereign country. Of course, we all have this fear.
When was the last time you stepped foot in Russia?
As I mentioned, I left Russia last March after beginning of the war, full-scale war against Ukraine, and I am living just outside Russia for this year and a half.
It is fascinating because there are very few comparisons that one could draw between you and Prigozhin, and I wouldn't dream of saying that you're anything like Prigozhin, apart from perhaps in one respect, that Vladimir Putin does not like you, and he did not like Prigozhin. Why would Prigozhin have taken a flight over the territory of Russia when clearly any neutral observer would think he was a man that Putin wanted dead?
There is a huge difference, and there is no comparison, huge difference between me and Prigozhin. It's strange that you compare this. It's not comparable at all. I was, of course, in different views, and that's why just we didn't work with Putin long, only just the first term, 4 years. And our vision of the future appeared to be different. I worked for my country to build up a democratic state as a European part or with the same values. Putin, as appeared to be, wanted to bring Russia back to Soviet Union. And just what he is doing right now, just creating the same fear among all in the world, so that to respect Russia only because of its existence, because of Russia can create danger. Prigozhin is close confidant of Mr. Putin forever. And his mutiny was not against Putin, not to change Putin. It was against, he wanted to press Putin so that Putin press officials to provide Prigozhin with money, with arms, and just with the legal status. Till now, Wagner Group is not legal in Russia. In Russia, there is no piece of legislation which could legalize such organizations like Wagner Group. That's why Prigozhin always was a criminal and continued to be a criminal till the end. And his, I would say, pressure on Putin was not forgivable by Putin. It was clear for me since the first day of this mutiny that Prigozhin will not live long. I didn't expect, of course, that he would be killed in such a demonstrative way as Putin did. But definitely that was an inevitable end.
Does Vladimir Putin seem weaker now? And if that is the case, is it more likely that Russia will go down a more authoritarian path? Or is there a chance that your vision of Russia, a more liberal, a more democratic, a more open society, is that a possibility for Russia?
It is a possibility to see Russia, in my vision, as democratic and prosperous country, but not now. Coming back to your first part of your question, after this Prigozhin's mutiny, Putin is weaker, and he looks, and he's being seen as weaker. And Putin understands this. That's why he tries to somehow to aggravate just some kind of support in the regions. He's traveling, although before he didn't travel, traveling to the regions, hugging people and trying to be nice and just to demonstrate for the whole country that he is supported. And right now, of course, the people in so-called ruling elite, they live in an atmosphere of total fear. Because just this demonstrative killing of Prigozhin, that is a signal to all of them. If they will try to escape, the Putin will do same with them. Either using Novichok or simple killing or just aircraft tragedy, whatever method that could be chosen. It doesn't matter much. But that Putin believes that is strengthening his rule. But I see he creating risks for his system. And in fact, we're all waiting success of Ukrainian counter-offensive operation. Although right now there is no, I would say, the great success, but sooner or later that will happen. And sooner or later, Ukrainian army would achieve the decisive advantage on the battlefield. And in this case, Putin will be weaker much quicker and deeper.
Well, Mikhail Kasyanov, I'm going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for talking to us this morning, but I'm afraid that leads us to the end of the programme. My name's been Tom Harwood, and this is the Camilla Tominey Show.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Through the rest of Sunday, we've got a mixture of scattered showers, some outbreaks of rain, but there will be a few brighter breaks in places. And looking at the bigger picture, high pressure sits to the southwest of us, a bit of a cool northwesterly flow bringing in showers and outbreaks of rain over the next couple of days. For Sunday afternoon, quite a lot of cloud out there. The best of any brighter, sunnier spells will be across eastern areas. However, This will then help trigger a few heavy showers, so do watch out for these. Central areas generally quite dry, though rather cloudy, and then across the far west we'll see patchy rain pushing in from the Atlantic. Temperatures on the cool side, generally the high teens to low 20s, with generally a light northwesterly breeze. Into the evening time, this band of patchy rain just continues to slowly push eastwards as we end the day and into the early hours of Monday morning. 1 or 2 sharp showers developing on it as it breaks up, and then clearer spells following on behind. Temperatures on the fresh side, low double figures in towns and cities, single figures in the countryside, but it means a brighter start to Monday morning. Some sunny spells, a few showers initially, but then a fairly bright day to come. Plenty of sunny spells across England and Wales. A little cloudier for Northern Ireland and Scotland, a few showers here, and a few of these then filtering in across England and Wales as the cloud bubbles up into the afternoon. A bit more sunshine around, temperatures lifting a little higher into the low 20s.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a